Michael Jackson, I mean, the name itself, it's an institution, right? For decades, he was, without a doubt, one of the most famous people on the entire planet. But what really made him the king of pop? Today, we're going to try to deconstruct it all, the unbelievable talent, the fame that was on a whole other level, and the very complex legacy of a true global icon. So, let's dive in. You know, this whole thing kicked off recently on a podcast with Bill Simmons, and it's a really interesting way to think about it. When we start asking who's the biggest, what are we even measuring? It kind of forces you to look back at the sheer scale of Michael Jackson's fame, a scale that even now, with the internet and social media, just feels almost impossible to imagine. And look, this greatest of all time debate, it's not new. For as long as I can remember, it's really circled around these three names. You've got the Beatles, the best-selling artists, you've got Elvis, the king of rock and roll, and then there's Michael Jackson, who is widely seen as the single most successful entertainer ever. And that word entertainer, that's the key right there. So what put him in that unique spot? To really get a handle on Jackson, you have to start with the art. The foundation of his entire world was this almost superhuman talent, but it was mixed with a work ethic that was just relentless and obsessive. This story from his music engineer, Bruce Swedian, is just absolutely wild. 91 vocal takes for Billie Jean. But here's the craziest part. The take they actually used, the one we all know and love, was take number 2. So we had it right at the beginning, but he did 89 more takes just to be absolutely sure. I mean, who does that? That's the level of perfectionism we're dealing with here. And you gotta understand, his voice was his instrument. Sure, he had this incredible range, but he also used his voice like it was a drum. Those signature vocal hiccups, the little gasps, they weren't just, for show. They were a crucial part of the rhythm. He was literally weaving percussive sounds into the very fabric of the beat. And the thing is, he didn't just come out of nowhere. He was a student of the absolute masters. He said it himself. He watched everyone. You can see the raw energy of James Brown, the impossible smoothness of Fred Astaire, the total showmanship of Sammy Davis Jr. in everything he did. He studied their genius to become a master himself. So, what was the result of all that insane work? Well, it's this number right here, 8. That is the record-smashing number of Grammy Awards he took home in one single night for the album Thriller. That wasn't just a win, you guys. That was a coronation. It was the entire industry basically saying, okay, this guy is on another planet. But Michael's genius wasn't just about what you could hear. He didn't just change the sound of music, he completely revolutionized how we see it. He took the music video, which was basically a commercial for a song, and turned it into a full-blown cinematic event. This might sound crazy today, but back in the early 80s, MTV was mostly a rock station, and there was a very real, though often unspoken, color barrier. The story goes that the channel just wasn't playing videos by black artists. Well, Michael Jackson was about to blow that door right off its hinges. I mean, just look at this timeline. This wasn't a slow burn. This was a lightning strike. March 83, Billie Jean drops. 2 months later, Beat It arrives. And then, by the end of the year, he unleashes Thriller, a 14-minute epic that changed everything. It wasn't a video anymore. It was a short film. And here's the really important part. This wasn't just a win for him. By literally forcing his way onto MTV, he kicked the door wide open for an entire generation of black artists who came after him. The whole direction of MTV changed. Pop and R&B went from being ignored to being the core of what they did. The channel that supposedly didn't want him, yeah, pretty soon they couldn't exist without him. And his innovation, man, it wasn't just artistic, it was technical. This right here is one of my absolute favorite examples. That incredible anti-gravity lean in Smooth Criminal, that wasn't some camera trick or wires. He literally invented and patented a special shoe and peg system that allowed him and his dancers to do a move that should be physically impossible. So you've got this insane innovation in music, in video, and dance, and it all came together to launch him into a level of fame that, honestly, the world had never seen before. He wasn't just a pop star anymore. He was a global phenomenon. Let's just talk about the business of being Michael for a second. At the peak of Thriller's success, he negotiated the highest royalty rate in the industry, making about $2 for every album sold. By 1992, he was selling the TV rights to a single concert for a cool $20 million. And then, one of the smartest moves in music history, he merged his music catalog with Sony's for a whopping $95 million up front, while still owning half. The man was a business force. How about this number? 133.4 million. That's how many people watched his Super Bowl halftime show in 1993. Now think about that. For the first time in history, the ratings for the halftime show were higher than the game itself. He didn't just perform at the Super Bowl. He was the Super Bowl. And, with that kind of global stage, he really put his energy into humanitarian work. He co-wrote We Are the World, which raised $63 million for famine relief. His own Healed World Foundation and the money from his Dangerous World Tour funneled $100 million toward different charities. It was so extensive that he was literally recognized by Guinness World Records for it. This quote from the New York Times, and remember, this was back in 1984, it just nails it. In the world of pop music, there is Michael Jackson and there is everybody else. Back then, that wasn't hype. That was just the reality. He was in a league of his own. But a level of fame like that, a fame that's almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around, it comes with a price, a really heavy one. And you can't really talk about his legacy without also looking at the controversies that would, come to define the rest of his life. So let's just walk through the timeline of the legal battles he faced, because they were a huge part of his later years. This is just laying out the major events as they're documented. In 1993, the first allegations came out, which led to a lawsuit that was settled out of court. Then in 2005, he went through a very public trial and was acquitted of all charges. After his death, FBI files were released that found no evidence of criminal conduct, and other lawsuits that were filed years later were eventually dismissed. And to understand his side of it, this is from a handwritten note of his that was published, and it was written years before the biggest legal cases even started. It really speaks to this feeling he had of being persecuted and hurt by the media, and this constant worry he had about how he was being seen. And of course, that intense scrutiny was all over his changing appearance. So while the tabloids were just running wild with all sorts of theories, the medical reality was he'd been diagnosed back in the 80s with vitiligo, which causes the skin to lose its pigment, and also lupus. These conditions really did radically change how he looked over the years, which only threw more fuel on the fire of public speculation. So what you're left with is this incredible duality, right? On one hand, you have the artist, the global icon, the musical innovator, the record-breaking entertainer, the philanthropist, just undeniable achievements. And on the other hand, you have this massive weight of controversy, the tabloid scrutiny, the legal battles, and the allegations that have deeply, deeply complicated how he's remembered. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? When an artist's life is this massive, this influential, and also this controversial, how do you even define their legacy? There's no easy answer. For a figure like this, legacy isn't just one single story. It's a messy, ongoing conversation about art and fame and how we decide to remember our heroes. Which part of that story is the one that sticks? Well, I think that's a question we're all still trying to answer.